Okay, in this lab, what we're going to look at is to verify Boyle's law, or basically verify that relationship between pressure and volume being an inverse proportionality. All right, to do that, we need to be able to measure pressure, okay, and volumes. We're going to use a device called a Vernier Go Direct Pressure Sensor. We're going to use a simple syringe, and we're going to use an iPad. That's all we really need, okay? So to do that, we're going to walk our way through the procedure here to give you guys some insight on that. When you come to class, you'll be doing the same procedure, but there's lots of little nitpicky steps. So I want to make sure you kind of see that happen so you kind of get the gist of what we're doing before we actually get to class. If you're one of my virtual learners, you will use this procedure and the data I'm collecting right now as the data that you will use to do your analysis for the lab, okay? So here we go. Our purpose here is to graphically verify the relationship between pressure and volume of a gas. So let's get it done. So first thing I need to do is I need to take this little guy here and I need to make it talk to my iPad, okay? And when you come to class, you'll do the same thing. So to do that, we want to make sure that the power is on and it is submitting a Bluetooth signal to that, which right now it's got a real red light flashing that tells me that it is on, but it is not connected to any device. On my iPad, I'm going to open up the app called Vernier Graphical Analysis. It's an app that we've asked you to download previously. And once I do that, it's going to ask me for one of three things. Do I want to have sensor data collection, data sharing, or manual entry? Okay. If you are one of my in-class students, you will do sensor data collection because you're going to be collecting your own data. My virtual students, you'll have to choose manual entry, and as I go through this procedure, you will have to manually enter in the same data to manipulate that on your own iPads, okay? So I'm gonna click on sensor data collection because I wanna be actually collecting the data. And now I need to find out which one of my devices do I have, because there's lots of these in a room right now. And mine in the bottom corner here says it's ID number 3560. I know it's probably hard to see on the screen. So I'm gonna look for 3560, and there it is, second to the bottom, 3560, and I'm going to hit connect. So this right now, we're connecting these things through Bluetooth, and it says it's connected, so now I can hit done. And to verify that, I'm looking for the green collect button at the top of my screen. My y-axis should say pressure. My x-axis at this point in time should say time on it, and in the bottom left, it should say mode time-based rate 1 sample per second. Okay, so we're successfully synced to this. Now, here's the problem. By default, this program thinks I want to do everything by time, and I don't want to do it by time. I want to choose when this thing is sending data. I don't want it just to completely send me data constantly, okay? So we're going to change that, okay? So we've set up the sensor, we've done part one. Now we're in part two, setting up our actual event, our data collection. So on the bottom left-hand corner where it says mode time-based rate 1 samples per second, I'm gonna click on that button, and I'm going to change my settings here to match what's in the image of your lab. So I'm not going to be time-based, I'm going to be event-based. I am going to do events with entry, so I'll leave that radio button the same. The event that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be changing volumes on this. So my event is going to be a volume, and the unit we'll be using is the milliliter. Okay. To get better data, I'm going to have it take an average of my sensor reading over 10 seconds. So instead of having one little snapshot, it's going to actually, when I tell it to, it's going to take 10-second average and pull that data for me, okay? So I'm going to turn on that button, and then it looks good. It matches what's on my lab sheet. I'm going to hit done, okay? You'll see some things that are different now on the iPad screen. Now we have a collect button at the top and then a grayed out keep button, which will become active here shortly. We do see a data columns to our right, and we now notice that on my y-axis, I still have pressure right here. If you touch that, it tells you that. And then on my x-axis, so I now have volume is what I am going to be measuring instead of time, okay? So I'm ready to collect my data on this. So coming down here to collect that data, I want to get my syringe to set up onto my pressure sensor. To do that, I'm going to set my syringe so the very first little black line on the plunger is exactly as best of my abilities at 10 milliliters, okay? And then I'm going to take this and I'm just going to twist it on until I feel a little resistance and then just snug it up. No more than that. It's really soft plastic in here and it seals up really nice, so I don't need to wrench it on. If you do, you'll break it, and then you break it, you buy it. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. We're ready to set up, and we're going to make this thing happen. So I'm going to start collecting data. So on my iPad, I'm just going to hit the button that says collect, you might be like, oh, how did you do it so fast? It's okay. Remember, it's not collecting data until I tell it to. So it's just going, okay, I'm ready now. What do you want me to do? All right. So we're going to move the plunger to our first data point. And you would think maybe I want to do that at the 10 milliliter mark. I don't want to do it at the 10 milliliter mark because this is where I preset it. So I want to actually move it someplace to take my first data point. All right. So I'm going to move this thing down to 8 milliliters on here. And all I'm doing is using my hand on the thing. I'm just going to grip it and kind of push it down until I see it on 8. Should be pretty easy to do at this point. And then I'm going to hold it here to the best of my abilities, okay, and keep it steady. All right. Once I think I have it set in the right spot steady, I'm going to hit the keep button on my iPad. So I'm going to hit keep, and it's going to say it's working, and it's trying to average over my 10 seconds here. So it's collecting data from this right now and taking an average over 10 seconds. When it's done with that, it's going to pull up a window that says, do you want to keep this point? At that point, I can release this, and I don't need to worry about this anymore. For some quirky thing, I have to always close the screen, click on the volume thing, because it doesn't know what I put the reading on here. Okay, it just knows a certain pressure. So I need to tell it that I was at 8. Now here's a problem. This syringe is accurate. However, there's a little bit of space between the syringe and the sensor, and that has been calibrated for you already from Vernier. It's 0.8 milliliters. So even though I was at 8, the sensor we have to add in 0.8 milliliters, okay? So I'm gonna get this thing back the way I had it so I don't have bad data here. Took that apart. So when I put this in, I'm gonna say 8.8, not just 8, but I'm going to take the 8 plus the 0.8. That is the space between those two things right in here. That's 0.8 of a milliliter in that. Okay? And then I'm going to keep that data point as my first data point. Now I'm going to repeat that process for 6 milliliters. So I'm going to go down to 6 milliliters, and I'm going to hit keep. And again, it's trying to average that out. Again, I'm just holding it by the syringe. We don't want to put pressure on this point. It's really the weak point of this system. If you push from underneath, it can crack right here. We don't want that. And then now, this was at 6.6 milliliters, and I will keep that point. Okay? And then I'm going to go down to 4. Now, 4 is a little bit tougher because 4, you got to kind of get your hands on it. You might need 2 hands to hold it there. I'm lucky enough I don't need to do that. I usually can hold it pretty steady at 4. And then I'm going to keep this at 4. Notice my hand shakes a little bit here because it is much harder to hold at 4 milliliters. I've compressed this thing down to 40% of the original volume. So you can imagine the pressure's gone up a lot. Okay, now I'm going to keep that point. I can release that now. I'm good to go. And this is at 4.8. Did I do 6.6 last time? I should have been 0.8. I'm going to fix it here in a second if I need to. Okay, so 4.8, keep that point. And sure enough, I did 6.6. I messed up. But that's the beauty of the data. I can go into that, click on it, and say, well, you know what? I didn't want that to be 6.6. And now it doesn't really want me to do it. It's like, hey, why are you not letting me do it? I got to stop my data collection. Then I can click on it and double click on it. And I can change that to 6.8 and say, nope, that's what I really wanted, 6.8. And the beauty is I can hit collect again. And it's going to say, what do you want to do now? It's like, well, you know what? I messed up, so I stopped data collection in the middle of it. I'm going to choose append because that's going to allow me to continue my data. So I'm going to add to it, or I'm going to append it to my data. Okay? Now, I've done 4, I've done 6, I've done 8. I'm not going to go any further than that because it just gets too hard to hold it steady. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in reverse now. So I'm going to reverse this thing. And actually, I'm going to bring it back to 10 at this point. And here's where I'm going to take my 10 point because now I've moved it up and down. And now is a better time to take that point for data. It shouldn't take a whole lot for me to hold it there. In fact, I can keep it there pretty easily. So I'm going to keep this data point now sitting at 10. And then I'll enter in 10.8 when it's done. All right, so I'm going to keep this point. That is 10.8 was my volume here. I'm going to keep that point. And now I'm going to keep going in my reverse. So now I'm going to go up to 12. So I'm actually going to pull. And then once I get it at 12, I'm going to kind of squeeze that with my hand because now it's going to pull against my hand instead of me pushing on it. I'm at 12. I'm going to keep this point. Averaging over 10 seconds. And again, this is 12.8. Keep that point. So I'm going to go to 14. Get that a good spot. I'm going to keep that point. Again, if you have to use two hands, it's fine because it's taking an average, so it's fine. And this is 14.8. Keep that point. And then I'm going to go to 16. It's getting a little bit harder. I'm going to keep that point. So what I'm actually experiencing is kind of a vacuum effect now inside of here where it's pulling against me because I'm actually reducing the pressure as I go inside of here. And that one was 16.8. And then I'm going to go one more. I think I got it in me to get it up to 18. Yep, there's 18, and I'm going to keep that point. Potentially you could do 20 also, but I tend to, sometimes it gets hard at that 20. It's just too far away, and I think a little bit of air leaks between it at that point. So usually I stop it at 18, so 18.8, and we'll keep that point. And now there is my data, okay? So that is the data, and I'm done collecting my data. If you look over on the right-hand side of my data set, I have all my volumes. I have 8.8, 6.8, 4.8, and then 10.8, 12, 14, 16. You might be concerned, like, wait a minute, they don't go in order. They don't have to, okay? Graphically, we don't care because it's not versus time, so all those data points are still on there, okay? And then, of course, the pressures that correlate with them. So you may be saying, okay, great, now what do I do with it, okay? Well, then that part, after the data collection is done, now we're talking about the analysis, okay? And the analysis, we're actually going to go through the process of taking this data and we're going to manipulate it a little bit to allow us to prove or basically verify that this is an inverse proportionality between pressure and volume, okay? So I'll let you do that yourselves. You don't need me to do that. You can read the steps on that and the process goes with that. If you are one of my virtual learners, you can see the data on my screen here on the iPad. You will need to input that data into your own Vernier file. And then once you have that data inputted, you can then also manipulate it just like anybody else, okay? Last thing here, I do need to stop my data collection so that way that data is now done and it is now collected. So it is ready for me to now manipulate it. All right, thank you.